Mother necessity with
Hey
her
guys,
good
welcome to a lecture on the Progressive Era. We have 10 minutes to cover the major concepts for the Progressive Era for the U.S. Regents exam. And remember, that's what these lectures are for. We don't get really detailed, we just go over big concepts. So, progressive, the root of course meaning progress, is the name given to the era, really kind of beginning around 1900. That is where the government is going to kind of end the era of laissez-faire for a little while. Remember, laissez-faire means hands off. And we're going to start to put our hands down around these problems, around child labor, around working conditions, around the labor problem with unions, around the environment, around trusts and monopolies killing competition. And we're going to get our hands dirty. We're going to get an active government. So I guess we should do a little bit of background. We only have 10 minutes, so we kind of have to go quick. But the roots of progressivism really start earlier on during the Gilded Age, when we think about groups like the Populists or the Knights of Labor, the Union, the Grange, the Progressive Party, the Socialist Party. These early risers, I guess, these early grassroots movement, show us the concept that change begins from the ground. That these kind of fire starters, that I'll call them sometimes, because the fire is eventually going to rise, and when it rises high enough, the government's going to be kind of forced to put its hands down because of that heat that rises from below, from the working class, from the urban centers, from immigrants, from sometimes radicals, but also middle class unions and all kinds of people. So the roots of progressivism start earlier, and we can actually see this concept of grassroots movements with the vocabulary word called muckrakers. I love the word muckrakers. It sounds kind of like a dirty word, muckraker. But you can hear in the word muck, which is dirt and kind of nasty stuff, and muckraker, the concept of raking. So basically a muckraker is somebody who digs up dirt and distributes it to the masses in order to light those fires underneath them. Muckrakers can be rap artists. Muckrakers can be novelists. Muckrakers can be, songwriters or reformers or whatever, really, but magazine writers. But the concept that we find in the progressive era, we can kind of see through. We'll do two or three. One of them is Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair was a socialist. Who really believed in kind of overthrowing the capitalist system, kind of this big idea. He was really kind of probably a radical for his time period. But he decided that he was going to write a book to expose the working conditions for the underclass of America, the proletarian, I guess, if you're a socialist. So he went into the slaughterhouses of, I think it was Chicago, and he kind of went in undercover as a journalist to kind of write this expose that he would later call The Jungle. About working conditions. He was thinking that people would be so upset that they would demand change for the worker, that they would see this unfair capitalistic system and they would become socialists. That's not exactly the way that it happened, but it's still a muckraking novel because as he wrote about the working conditions of the slaughterhouses, that's what people became interested in. They became interested in, as they wrote it, about the meat contamination, about the unregulated, working conditions that their meat came from. So when they read about the disease and the excrement and the blood and the yuckiness of the process of slaughtering animals for your pleasure, for your eating pleasure, they that was the fire they felt. That was the fires that they lit. They read the Muckraker, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, and they started calling their congressmen and having rallies and put your hands down around this problem of the meatpacking plants. And through Teddy Roosevelt and the Square Deal, we're going to get the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Pure Food and Drug Act, and Meat Inspection Act, which is going to regulate the slaughterhouses. This is a prime example of muckraking, grassroots movements, a writer starting from the bottom, having his information distributed and causing these fires to spread, and then causing the government to stop that laissez-faire, put its hands down, sometimes called regulation, and regulate the problem, the slaughterhouses. A couple other ones. I guess one of the big concepts that we talked about earlier in the industrial age was the idea of monopolies, trusts, pools, corporations that were controlling the economy because of their ability to kill the magic word, starts with a C, sounds like competition, therefore driving up prices and also controlling workers' lives. So Frank Norris, another muckraker, wrote a book called The Octopus. And the octopus, kind of this concept in my head, is of a giant trust, railroad trust, with the hub of the octopus and the tentacles being the railroads. And this beast that was really controlling farmers' lives, that was destroying farmers' lives through its controlling railroad prices. So what this led to, specifically it led to the Hepburn Act, which is going to regulate railroad prices. This is another kind of square deal, Teddy Roosevelt law. But the bigger concept is that we're going to start to break up these trusts. We talked about the Sherman Antitrust Act. I don't have my baseball bat. I guess I can use this. But the concept of the Sherman Antitrust Act is that now we have the power, Teddy Roosevelt does, to swing this puppy at these giant monopolies and trusts and break them up in order to create competition through smaller businesses or more businesses. So the Sherman Antitrust Act is big. Let's kind of get to the gritty here and really talk about Teddy Roosevelt. I really should talk about state reform. State reform comes first. It's really important that we understand that there's levels of reform. It's not like a messiah comes and just changes everything. That change begins at that grassroots. We saw through the populists, the Grange, the progressives, the socialists, and now through individuals, muckrakers like Upton Sinclair and Frank Norris, the octopus. So states usually are what we call sometimes the experiments of democracy, because they try out things first. So with the Wisconsin idea, which began in Wisconsin by Governor Bob La Follette, really started out some of these democratic reforms first. This concept of the government enabling democracy, the government regulating and putting its hands down to spread democracy and be an enabler of it rather than just an observer of it. So there's a few vocabulary words on the regents that are associated with the Wisconsin idea. One of them is initiatives. Initiatives are easy to remember because you can think of the root of initiative being to initiate. An initiative is when people initiate a law, where you write a law, and then that law goes onto a ballot and it's directly put into action. So it's kind of bypassing the lawmaking process, giving you power. Referendums is another word that sometimes is on the test. California uses referendums, where you refer a law to be passed. It's kind of the same concept of initiatives. Recall. Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor of California because the people of California have the ability to recall their governor. And they did that to the former governor, Governor Davis, when they felt as though he was raising their taxes too much. So they kind of pulled him out of office and forced a special election. I'm thinking there's another one. Primaries. Primaries are where now parties are going to be controlled by the people. So when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton ran in the primary, it was Democrats who decided who was going to be their choice for president. This began in Wisconsin. Before that, it was some fat guy with a cigar in the back room. Joe, you're the guy. Then you get graft and you get greed. We're spreading democracy. So we have state reforms, the Wisconsin idea, initiatives, referendums, recall, and the direct primary. We have about a minute now to talk about Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy Roosevelt, of course, is really our first progressive president. He was a Republican. And he is the kind of, first guy who's really going to put his hands down around some of these problems. And we've already talked a little bit about some of the things that he did. But he's called the Trust Buster. Again, you grab that Sherman Antitrust Act. He swang this thing, 30, 40, 50 times, breaking up what he saw as kind of, strangling monopolies and trusts that were killing competition. Teddy Roosevelt was a believer in collective bargaining. He kind of legalized unions in a sense and made it kind of a fair, level playing field between the worker and the owner. He believed in the environment and conservation. He began the National Park Reclamation Act and kind of had the government take over and preserve, using its power to have national parks and such. The Hepburn Act regulating railroads. I'm running out of time. The Progressive Era, progress, about 1900, and we're done, guys. I gotta go. See you later.